The interview is being conducted for the Veterans History Project for the Library of Congress. The veteran's name is Eugene Mathis. He was born on October 3rd, 1924. He served in the Army during World War II, European theater. He achieved the rank of Master Sergeant. We are recording this on July 17, 2013. I'm Will Hines, and I'm conducting this interview. No relation. So, Mr. Mathis, I understand that you went to Clemson University.
Yes.
And you joined the military from there. Can you kind of tell me what happened with that?
Well, they came along and offered I was studying to be a mechanical engineer.
Mm-hmm.
And they said they needed engineers, and if we would sign up for reserve, they would leave us in school. But I didn't realize when I signed up that they figured you could be an engineer in about 30 or 60 days, because 60 days later I was in Fort Bragg. So that's how the Army and I became friends.
And what year is this?
I signed up in 1942,
Mm-hmm.
and they called me, and as well as I remember, about March of 43 to active duty.
So you were in Fort Bragg in March of 1943?
Yeah. And from there, I went to Camp Walters, Texas. And there I took the basic training.
And can you kind of describe that basic training?
Well, it was not easy,
Mm-hmm.
because we went through a whole lot of marches. As well as I remember, we went on an 8-hour, 25-mile march.
And did you have full gear on?
Full gear.
Oh, God.
It took us 8 hours. We got a break every hour for 10 minutes during that thing. But the worst one that I went through, it seems like that we went one time, it seemed like it was 5 miles, and then we had to almost run because we did it in nearly an hour.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we really moved out. And by the time that was over with, we were pretty well bushed. I mean, we were worn out.
And at basic training, did you go through rifle training, or was that
Went
later
through
on?
rifle training. We went through mortar training, infiltrating. We crawled through barbed wire with them firing machine guns over our head.
Mm-hmm.
And of course we bivouacked out a lot, and it was at that time, as well as I remember, I guess it was 13 weeks. It was basic training. And then you went from there, you went to a unit somewhere and went overseas.
So it was,
But-
what month was it and when you went overseas? Do you remember? Like
No,
August?
well, I didn't go then.
Hmm.
Fortunately, I was selected and promoted to corporal and stayed there in Camp Walters for about another 6 months.
Training? Or?
As a trainer in basic training. And then I went from there, I went up to Camp Maxey, Texas, to the 125th Infantry Regiment. And I don't remember exactly how long I was there. And then that's when I went overseas, and that seems like that was, I don't remember exactly when it was, but
Did you go to England when you went overseas?
I went overseas on the Queen Mary.
Oh, wow. That's neat.
I had a stateroom for 2. Of course, there were 17 others in there with me. We were double loaded. I think they said it was about 17,000 on that thing going over. And we didn't go in convoy because it moved so fast. Only took 4.5 days to go over on it.
Really?
And landed in Scotland. And then from Scotland we went to England. And then from England I caught a boat and went across the English Channel to France.
How long did you stay in England?
At the most, a couple of weeks, at the very most. I don't remember exactly. But then we landed, as I told you, at Omaha about 2 months after the invasion.
What was it like landing there, seeing all were there a lot of destructed objects? And
Well, no, we had to go down those nets on the ship, just like the fellows that made the invasion into landing craft.
on a Higgins boat, or was it?
Yeah, and landed there, and then we, as I say, I don't see how those fellows ever got ashore there, up those hills, because it was just a straight up cliff.
Mm-hmm.
And
Did you see the remains of the German pillboxes and?
oh yeah, I got to see in those pillboxes and things when we landed there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to a replacement depot, and I don't remember how long I was there, not very long. And then I was assigned, and I had no idea where it was, but I was assigned to the Texas 36th Division, which was in southern France at that time. And I remained with the Texas 36th Division, and I think I was a corporal when I went. Then I was promoted to a buck sergeant, staff sergeant, tech sergeant, and then I left them when a lot of them, of course, had been with the Texas 36th Division all the way from Italy.
So they landed in Sicily, or?
Yeah, they landed in the southern Italy down there.
Mm-hmm.
And of course they had been there a long time, and you had to have so many points to go home.
Right.
And of course I didn't have that many points, because I don't remember how many, but it was a good many points you had to have. And so consequently, I was I did not stay. The division, I think, I don't remember exactly, but it came back to the States. I don't know. It was rotated back to the States. So then I was transferred to Marseille. After a while, well, at first I was in Germany in the Army of occupation, we called it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went down to Marseille, France, and I was in what they called a labor supervision outfit, where we had the German prisoners that were in Marseille. We had a big thing down there in Marseille with German prisoners.
Wow.
And from there then was when I went home. And I came home. I had a 60-day leave, and because I had decided that I was going to stay in for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So first I went to Aberdeen Proving Ground. It's an ordnance thing. And from there, I went to Fort Dix, New Jersey, supposedly. Well, in the meantime, I had been promoted to a first sergeant when I was there. And then I was transferred from Atlanta Ordnance Depot to Fort Dix, New Jersey, supposedly to go to an infantry company or something there as the first sergeant. I got there, they already had 16 first sergeants. So it was a mess. It really, as a first sergeant, it wasn't anything much for you to do with that many first sergeants there. So finally, the only way they told me you could get out of there was to go to school. So I got in the Atlanta Ordnance Depot school as a third echelon mechanic school. Well, that I didn't like too well. So there was a regulation that you could request to be transferred back to an infantry unit. So I requested that, and I was transferred to the 2nd Infantry Division in Fort Lewis, Washington. And I hadn't gotten there very long. I was first sergeant of a company. Found out they were going to Alaska on maneuvers. Well, after that winter in Germany, I didn't want to go anywhere where it was cold. So I started writing letters trying to get out of there. And I finally got out of there to the University of California as an ROTC instructor in Santa Barbara. And it was a new unit of ROTC because it had been known as the Santa Barbara State Teachers College, but during the war it went under the university system and became Santa Barbara University of California. And they were required to have ROTC. So we went there and helped activate it. And I stayed there from sometime in 1947 till I got out in 1949.
Okay.
And then that's when I went back to Clemson. I started back in February of '50 and finished in February, in August of '52. Because I went straight over around this summer's.
So what kind of gear did you carry over in Europe? Did you carry an M1 Grand or?
Huh?
Did you carry an M1 Grand? What gun did you carry? And
Well, I carried a carbine. Maybe I did have an M1 to begin with, I don't remember. But then I had a carbine. And then I had a .45 pistol and a Tommy gun. And that's what I ended up carrying, was that Tommy gun as a squad leader and a platoon sergeant and a section sergeant and things.
so whenever you joined up with your group in, was it 44 with your group whenever you were a replacement in France? Where did y'all go from there?
Yeah, it was in 44, yeah.
And you joined up with them?
And went through from then through till the end of the war in May of 45.
What was your first battle? Do you remember your first combat experience?
No, I don't remember exactly where it was. It was up in some hill there in France somewhere, it seemed like, and The ones I remember the most was after we got into Germany. Because, I mean, we were getting them out of France. They were sort of on the run.
Mm-hmm.
And once they got back in Germany, it was more of a,
Defend
they
the
were more
homeland.
dug in, and it was a tougher fight. And I guess probably as tough a situation it was getting through the Maginot Line. And, or not the Maginot Line, the Siegfried Line.
The Siegfried line.
Yeah.
Okay. I've seen pictures of the line and how it has all those barriers and how on earth did y'all get through that?
Well, it was just, you could almost see the foxhole you dug yesterday, because that's how close you were slowly moving through there. And to get them out of those pillboxes, we had to get the engineers up there and plant charges on them and just blow the things open.
Mm-hmm.
And then they would come out.
Yeah, I've seen clips of people bringing charges and throwing them in there and taking off.
Well, they had what they called, but they put them on the outside of this thing, and it was more or less, it really, the exploded part of it went right at one point, blowing a hole into the thing. And they'd come out of there, their eyes and nose would be bleeding and things from the explosion on the inside.
Wow.
And
that was that in 45, going through the Siegfried line?
yeah, that was in early 45, yeah.
Now, I know you fought, you participated in the Battle of the Bulge.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, we were down in the lower part of Germany, and the Battle of the Bulge took place up there with the 101st Airborne.
In the Ardennes?
Yeah, and we had to move from down in southern France up towards it and close in up there. Now, I didn't get into Bastogne. I mean, Patton had moved his Third Army and relieved them up and around Bastogne. But I was in the 7th Army, and we sort of just closed in around Colmar and things down in that part of it. And we finally, our push was to the Rhine River towards the end. So we were rather thin during the Battle of the Bulge, because they had pulled so many divisions and shipped them up into that battle that we were really scattered out. Really, we had gaps in our lines that we didn't like and things, because they could infiltrate through those gaps that we had. And
Now, that was right in the winter, so how cold was the winter?
cold as they could get.
I
My feet got so cold in my boots I couldn't feel them. And I remember the first jet airplane I ever saw. We were up somewhere, and it was very cloudy, and the ceiling wasn't even above the trees. And I told my fellows, I said, we're gonna freeze, let's build a fire. We built a fire. And when the clouds cleared some, here comes this thing that looked like a glider. And he threw the power to that thing, and it threw a flame out the back of it, and that was the first jet airplane that I'd ever seen.
really was it. It was a German airplane, correct?
Yeah. And of course, he wasn't after us. He was after the artillery and stuff back in there.
Were y'all ever strafed?
Yeah. Uh, and we shot back at those suckers, even
With your rifles?
rifles, machine guns, and everything else. I was in a heavy weapons company. We had 30 caliber water-cooled
Okay.
machine guns and 81 millimeter mortars. Of course, we didn't fire the mortars at them, but we did fire. We fired our machine guns and rifles and everything else
Mm-hmm.
at them when they'd come over. Of course, we were in foxholes and down in we didn't jump up and get out of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And however, I never got strafed in a vehicle or anything with them.
That's good. How often were y'all attacked by artillery?
Artillery,
Mm-hmm.
every day. Those Germans that fire that 81 millimeter thing they had at anything. That wasn't 81.
It was
That's
an
what our
88.
mortar was. It was a
It wasn't an 88?
88s. That's what they were. Yeah. They'd fire. They used them as anti-tank guns, and they used them as artillery, and they even used them as anti-aircraft.
With flak?
Yeah, it was an amazing gun, and it was, and they had another one that we disliked very much called a Screaming Mimi.
Hmm.
These were tubes with like a rocket in them, and they'd light it, and it'd fly out of those things, and it made the gosh awfulest noise you ever heard. And the explosion of it, it wasn't that dangerous. It like artillery shell, it had a lot of shrapnel. And this thing was just more or less of an explosion. And but it was very irritating and very scary to get under an attack with them.
I feel like I can't imagine the helpless feeling that you have when you're in a foxhole and you're being bombarded.
Yeah, well, you really felt much safer than you did when you were out of a foxhole and got shelled.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you were in a forest or anything and those shells hit in those trees, the shrapnel was terrible coming down. And that was the worst part of it. Of course, we got under small arms fire, but I wasn't under as much small arm fire as a rifleman was. Heavy weapons, we set up more in a position and fired those machine guns. And
Did you have riflemen to support you?
no, they set up around it. When they set up a defensive position, we then set up our machine guns in where we had cover,
Mm-hmm.
because we had to have cover for us, because I mean we had nothing but those machine guns really. And of course the ones that carried the ammunition stuff did have a rifle, but we didn't set up by ourselves. The riflemen of the rifle company more or less told us where they'd like for our machine guns to be.
So were you a machine gunner, or did you fire the 30 caliber or whatever you...
No, I was a platoon sergeant, and I had gunners that fired.
Mm-hmm. So you commanded them
Yeah.
to their position?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I know that you have a Purple Heart. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, I was very fortunate. I had a lot of tough calls and escapes, but the Purple Heart was probably the easiest thing I got. I got hit in the hand with shrapnel. And I was in much more dangerous positions that I didn't get hit. I mean, this thing didn't put me in the hospital or anything.
It didn't. So it didn't take off a finger or anything.
No, it didn't. It hit right in here, and you can barely see where it hit now. There used to be a scar in there, all right, but it's about with old age and things, and your hands, it's disappeared.
So you said you were in tougher positions. Do you?
Oh yeah, I was under fire from in places that they were firing machine guns and things that I had to get down under cover of in an open field under a terrace, and that sucker was firing overhead, and you were very fortunate that you could crawl out of there or something, because I could hear me
In an open field.
hitting back behind me into a house, and we were out in the field, and those machine gun bullets were hitting in that house.
Could you hear them whizzing by, hitting grass and?
No, it wasn't that close really, I don't think, but I mean I knew that they were coming across, because if it was at night, they had tracer bullets that you could see the tracer. Because see, we fired tracers too in our machine guns.
So you could see where you're shooting.
6th round was a tracer, so we could tell where it was we were going with them.
Now, did you ever face any German tanks, any Tigers, Panzers?
Yeah, we faced some of those too, and that was when it was good to be in a foxhole, because I mean they had those 88s on those tanks, had the machine guns, and we had what we called, what did we call them?
Were they the bazooka things?
Bazookas, we had them, yeah. But hitting a German Tiger tank with that thing is just like
when it just bounced right off of it?
Striking a match up on it, because it didn't penetrate. You had to hit it in the track somewhere and get it from being mobile.
Yeah, I know the front and the sides were plated really well, but if you hit it underneath or on the tracks.
Yeah.
So how would you, so your bazooka guys would take those out, or?
Oh yeah, and of course we would call up our tanks too, and of course our tanks weren't as equipped with anything as strong at first as those 88s were, but our tanks were pretty sharp too. The bad thing about being in a tank is if they got a shell that hit and penetrated, the shrapnel from that thing just ricocheted all over that tank. I've pulled fellas out of tanks that had been in one, and their wounds were terrible. I mean, they cut them up terrible in a tank. It was hit with shells.
Are you talking about a Sherman tank? Sherman's?
Yeah, Sherman.
That's crazy. I don't know if I would like being in a tank almost stuck in an iron box.
I don't think I would have ever wanted to be in a tank. Now, the only time we did ride on tanks sometimes, getting a position or something.
And then you jump off. And...
Oh yeah. I mean, once we got up pretty close to where we needed to go, we got off of them. And we didn't like to be around tanks, because they had to crank those things and charge those batteries up and everything. And that's when the Germans liked to shell, when they heard those tanks cranking.
Really?
Oh yeah. But most of the time they had dug in positions that they weren't sitting up high.
Mm-hmm.
They were down.
Tanks were?
Yeah.
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 How often did you have to call in artillery? Did you call in artillery or?
Well, I called in some artillery, but most of the time we had an artillery observer with us from the artillery that called it in.
Mm-hmm. How do you call it in? Do you call in the coordinates and?
Oh yeah, he'd call it in and tell them where to fire it, and of course he was pretty sharp, but he knew how to call it in to where and what. We called in artillery pretty close over our head because, especially at night, we didn't want them coming in on us. So we had fire out in front of us. And it wasn't that high. You could hear those shells of ours going over.
So you would just tell them randomly to fire over your head at night, or?
Well, I mean, if we were in a position to where we thought that the Germans could infiltrate in on us at night, that's when we'd call in what we called harassing fire. Just enough to harass them out there that they knew
just a shell every few seconds to.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, because I've heard the sayings "fire for effect" and all those different things.
Yeah. Once he got it in to where he thought was the position, that was when he called in fire for effect. And then they really laid it in there strong. And
now, did you ever have to go through any door-to-door fighting or house-to-house fighting, any type of street fighting? And
we did some, but not in a heavy weapons company. You didn't do it. And most of that was rifle companies that had to do that. And
so you were almost blessed to be in a heavy weapons company.
Oh yeah, it was. Now, if they had houses and things that they couldn't get into very well, we'd set up and fire into those houses. And of course, we would try to get into a covering position to where we could cover them while they were moving forward. Overhead.
Cover the infantrymen while they move forward.
Yeah, overhead fire. But a rifleman in an infantry rifle company, that was a tough position. I mean, because you had to advance, you had to get out of that foxhole and go.
Yeah.
And of course, we used any kind of cover we could to keep from being exposed as much as you had. But most of the time, when you were advancing, you were exposed. You had to be out there, and that's where. Now we had casualties in heavy weapons companies, but we didn't have anything like casualties that the fellows in the rifle companies had. They were really exposed to it. Small arms fire.
Yeah. So y'all didn't face too much small arms fired?
Oh, well, sometimes when we were in dug-in positions and the Germans tried to make an advance, we were.
So were y'all attacked often? Did y'all ever have to almost retreat?
I remember once that we did up at the Siegfried line. And what happened was the rifle company started withdrawing, and we didn't know it, and we were exposed. And I remember telling my platoon leader, I said, we got to get out of here because they're leaving, and we can't sit here because we can't cover this territory. I said, if you'll withdraw them and take them back, I'll wait till the end and come back. No, he says, it'd be my job to stay here. You take them back and start. I said, I don't want to argue with you. So I got up and took them back, and we pulled back to another position where the rifle company had. We had to.
Wow.
Because we were exposed as a...
And when you say you were exposed, do you mean you were being attacked, or?
We were being attacked, and we could see the Germans were coming. And we were firing at them, but they were scattered out, so when here we were bunched up.
So you didn't have any people
We
on
didn't
your
have
right or
anybody
left?
on our right and left flanks,
Oh.
so we had to pull back.
Or you were going to be
That only
flanked?
happened very rarely,
Mhm.
because most of the time, when the rifle companies were going to move back, they told us, knock down your guns and get ready to move.
So you told me you traveled underneath a river in the...
Yeah, the Danube.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Well, we went under that thing in a dam, and we thought when we got up there that we were going to have to cross that thing, you know, but we didn't have no way to cross it. But they found this dam, power plant, really, I think it was, and of course the Danube wasn't that big or wide river right there. So we went through that thing in a hurry.
Because you thought the Germans were going to blow it up.
I didn't know what was going to happen to that thing. So we were glad to get through it and get out of there.
Now, when you advance, do you have riflemen in front of you advancing, or?
Yeah, most of the time the riflemen were the leader, because, see, with those heavy machine guns, you just didn't pick them up and move fast with them. And more or less a machine gun like we had. Now, of course, the riflemen had light machine guns that they could carry.
Yeah, what were those? They were like...
We called them light machine guns, and then they had a little tripod like up on the
Someone
front.
carried the tripod and ammo, and someone carried the actual
No,
gun?
that's what we did.
Oh.
On the heavy weapons, we carried the tripod, one carried the barrel and things, but the riflemen that had their machine guns, one man carried it.
Oh, like a
It had a
BAR?
little tripod up on the front of the barrel.
Okay, like a
and where he
BAR or
could set it
something.
down and fire. It was like had a butt on it like a rifle. And see, he held it under his arm and fired it. And he could fire it from a standing position.
But it was hard.
But most of the time he had to have in a position to where the belt had to go through it.
Okay, because I know movies aren't very accurate, but I've seen in movies the heavy machine guns with the riflemen. And that's probably not how it was.
No.
Nope.
I mean, those machine guns we had, they were called, see, they were water cooled. The barrel.
So you had to have water
had a
too.
barrel around it, and the barrel went through that drum, and then we poured water in there to keep that barrel from burning up. Because you get red hot if you didn't have it in there.
Wow.
It firing so fast.
So did you fight in the Battle of the Rhineland? Is that what it's?
Yeah.
And I really don't know much about that. So what did you do there?
It was more or less a house-to-house deals, cities and things like that. And then, yeah, I don't remember, we'd stay in a house and use it as cover and set up ours was more or less in a heavy weapons company. We'd set up a position, and as they advanced, then we would move forward and set up another defensive position to give them cover and fire if they had to withdraw or something.
Mm-hmm. Now, did you interact with many civilians over in France and in Germany?
Did we interact with them?
Did you deal with a lot of them? Were they?
Not a whole lot with the Germans, because after the war was over, we weren't allowed to fraternize with them.
Really?
No,
I didn't know about that.
No. I mean, any conversation that was carried on with them was done with interpreters and things. That we didn't do a whole lot of it. I mean,
What about in France? Did you
oh
speak
yeah,
to many
I mean,
civilians?
the French, you associated with them, and of course, most of the time, any with them was more behind the lines than it was up in the forward part of it, because they were like we were. They wanted to get out of there. Didn't want to be in the battle either. So they would evacuate houses and things and get out of it.
Did you get to go to Paris whenever you were in France?
Get a what?
Did you get to go to Paris when you were in France?
Oh yeah, after the service was over with, I was in Paris, and after the war was over, I went to Berlin.
Really?
Yeah.
I bet that was interesting seeing all the...
it was, and I went into the Russian territory too while I was there. It was a very bummed out city. I mean, now some of it was and some of it wasn't. The worst one I saw city was a place called Kassel. And I saw it on my way to Berlin. It was almost completely destroyed. We bombed it in daylight, I think, and the British bombed it at night.
Yep.
And it was almost completely destroyed. And it was a pretty good sized city too.
Wow.
And that was the worst one that I saw. Now there may have been some others that were worse than that, but that was, to me, was the worst one I saw.
Did you ever see any bombers flying overhead, the B-17s, B-24s from the 8th Air Force?
Oh yeah. I've forgotten now where it was. And I think that they were bombing Berlin. But the big bombers went over nearly all night long.
Wow.
And they came back over on this side nearly all night long. So they bombed Berlin or wherever they were bombing that night, all night long. And I mean, you could hear them going over and things. And of course, the Germans used to fly planes over us at night, and we called them bed something Charlie, because it was they were trying to locate something. They wasn't bombers or anything, but just, It was the strangest sounding old plane that they was flying. And
So they were trying to locate positions, or
yeah,
what?
I think they were trying to find where the artillery or something was and things. Because, I mean, they never dropped anything or we could hear them. But when our planes went over, we knew they were loaded and they were going to bomb somewhere. And I don't remember ever seeing any aerial combat. I mean, if I did, I don't recall it. We saw a lot of fighter planes go over, but I don't ever recall just seeing fighter planes and German planes
Fighting.
having aerial fights. No.
Did you ever come across any planes that were shot down?
No, I don't recall if I did. No, I don't. However, we did see that up near Munich or somewhere, they had all these planes. They had run out of gas, I think, by that time, and they were parked back off of the Autobahns, and they were using the Autobahn for a runway.
Wow.
And they had these fighter planes camouflaged back off of the highway. And I saw those, they were just sitting there and things.
How much sleep did y'all get each night? Would it vary?
Well, most of the time, I mean, I don't remember a whole lot of combat during the night. I mean, we posted guards, and I mean, some of us stayed awake for a certain period of time, and then they were relieved. And of course, as far as when we were in a position, we kept our guns with somebody on the gun ready to fire it all night long.
I heard that, I don't know if this is true with the Germans, but I knew the Japanese used to shell during the night just to keep people awake and shell every now and then. Did the Germans do that with y'all?
Yeah, we get a lot of artillery fire at night. But as far as infantry attack, we didn't get a whole lot. Germans just like us, they had to fight in the daytime too. I mean, they didn't enjoy fighting at night. Of course, most of the artillery that they fired at night was more or less just harassing fire. Not that they were laying down a big barrage of artillery fire at night before an attack or something.
Now, how did you get the Bronze Star? I don't really understand the Bronze Star.
Well,
Do you
the
get
Bronze
it for
Star, a lot of us got them just for
service?
our combat things. Now the Silver Star, most of the ones that got a Silver Star did something extraordinary. I put in a couple of guys for the Silver Star that got it for outstanding, beyond the call of what they.
So what kind of thing are you talking about? Like,
well, you ask them to go do something that was
difficult.
Like, I remember one that I had, this guy was, up in the 6th Street line. I think the guy had been wounded or something and was under fire or somewhere. And I asked somebody, some guy, to volunteer to go down there, try to get him out of that position and get him to where we could get him
Help.
some aid, medical aid. And he went down there, and I put him in for the Silver Star because he went down there
Through fire.
Yeah, and I remember one of the company commander or something said, I don't know whether that's brave enough to get the Silver Star. And so I asked him, I said, well, would you like to come down there?
Exactly.
I said, I didn't want to go. And I asked, and this guy volunteered to go. And so I said, I think it was extraordinary. And so we put him in and he got it.
Good.
Yeah. But all the other things other than the Bronze Star was more or less outstanding bravery under fire. And I had a fellow that got the Congressional Medal
Really?
tell me that he says, you know, at the time I did it because I had to. He says, it wasn't that I did it to get anything for it. He says, I did it to save my own self.
Mm.
He said, and I maybe save somebody else doing it. But he says, it was a matter of something that had to be done, and I did it. And he says, at the time, I wasn't thinking about, well, this is beyond the call of duty that I should be rewarded for it.
Right.
He said,
I think that's just like every other soldier who fought over there.
Yeah.
They didn't do it for accolades. You didn't do what you did for accolades. You did it to
you
save
did
this.
it for what you had to do,
Mm-hmm.
and you took chances sometimes that had to be, something had to be done, and it wasn't that you were doing it because you felt like you were braver than anybody else. You did it because it had to be done, and that was it. And sometimes it came out that you were just lucky and you got by, and nothing happened. And you know, I never worried about getting killed.
Really?
I worried about getting wounded and laying out there,
Mm.
getting hurt.
And being
Now,
in pain.
Of course, if you thought about it, maybe I was dumb that I didn't think about getting killed, but that wasn't something that well, you knew that it was a possibility. If you were under fire, you knew that. I mean, it's just a matter that you knew that there was a possibility. But I don't think any of us really sat around and worried about it. I worried about the cold weather a whole lot more than I worried about anything else when it was so blooming cold.
Well, if your feet were that cold all the time, I'd understand that.
Yeah. And of course, when they could, they got us up something to eat, warm and good. Other times we ate those canned rations. And,
Yeah, let me hear about those. They were called K rations, right?
well, they were K rations. They were the ones that were in boxes.
Mm-hmm.
C rations were the ones that were in the cans. And you got 3 cans of them a day.
What was in it?
Well, there was beans in one, hash in one, and stew in one.
Hmm.
And then one was crackers and I don't remember whether there was any cheese was in it. Sometimes there was uh, jam or jelly or something in there with it. But I got to the point I got by on one can of it a day.
You just couldn't take it?
It just was you just didn't have an appetite really. And some of the K rations we enjoyed because we could heat them up and things. We were in position to where we could heat them up and things like that. And of course, we had one old boy in our outfit. He knew how to kill chickens and dress them and cook them.
So, would y'all feast sometimes?
The farmer had a chicken. We liable to get his chicken while we were there. And you didn't get much to eat other than those K and C rations, unless it was where that they could get the kitchens up and cooked, and you got a hot meal.
Mm-hmm.
And about every 6 weeks you got a shower, but they did get you up clean socks and stuff every day, and if it was possible.
Mm-hmm.
And
now, did you ever get sick over there, like flu type stuff? And
I had sinus trouble bad,
mm-hmm.
and I remember I got treated for that, and the treatment was worse than the sinus was. However, after the war was over and I was down there in Marseille and the sunshine and everything else, I got virus pneumonia. And I didn't know at that time that virus pneumonia is contagious. And they put me in the hospital, and I was in a room, and they told me, don't get out of this room. Never get out of this room. Because they brought you meals to you, they brought everything to you in that room. Well, I come to find out that was in the contagious disease ward. They had spinal meningitis, diphtheria, and everything else in there. That's the reason they told you don't get out of the room.
Because they don't want you to get something else.
They didn't want you to get something else.
I couldn't imagine working in there.
Well, I wondered why. Nobody from the company came to see me. The company commander didn't come to see me. Nobody came to see me. That's the reason they didn't come to see me. They wouldn't let them in there.
I don't know if I'd come to see you.
No, nobody wanted to come to see you. And of course, the other guy that was in the room with me, he had virus pneumonia too. Now they gave him penicillin, but they gave me sulfur drugs because I didn't have it as bad as he did. I guess maybe they didn't have that much penicillin or what, I don't know. They'd come in and give him a shot in the rear end. I was glad I wasn't getting that because it seemed like the needles were that long and all that. But the only trouble with that sulfur drugs, you had nightmares. Oh man, I dreamed about everything in the world. I saw elephants and everything else, and it was a mess. But, well, as I remember, I stayed in the hospital about 16 days with that thing.
Wow.
And I lost a lot of weight, and it took me a long time to gain it back. And that's about the only thing after the war that I ever had any problem with.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly sinus trouble, and I still got in.
Yeah.
You know, I don't really get rid of it. Fortunately, now I don't have headaches with it.
Oh, that's good.
But I have drainage all the time.
Do you still have any aches from being over in Europe and being in the military?
No, I don't know of any. I do have trouble in this ankle on this foot. Now, at one time, they told me here a couple of years ago that I had a fracture. But I don't know what I did to get a fracture. Because I didn't fall and I didn't turn it or anything else. But I wore a boot for a while. And now, when I sit for a good while and get up, for the first little bit it hurts. And then it quits. I think it's arthritis, really. And I have trouble in this hand and in this hand. And I don't know whether that's was
Military.
due to anything I had in the military or not. I don't know. The only thing that I had was this shrapnel wound in the hand and the sinus treatment I got over there. I had terrible sinus. And they put these swabs up your nose.
Oh, God.
And leave those things in there, and when they pulled them out, it felt like they pulled your heels plumb out, up through you and out you. That was the worst part of it. But other than that, I don't know really the worst part of beginning into the Army is the basic training. I mean, it's tough. I mean, physically, you go in there as off the street, you think you're in good shape, but you're not in the shape that you walk and trot and crawl and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And you learn. I would not be opposed to basic military training for everybody. I mean, when they finish high school, maybe.
I think, personally, 2 years in the military for everyone would be great for society.
You learn to be disciplined.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have to follow orders, you have to do what you're told and things, and you learn how to tell somebody else how to do things and so it would not be the worst thing that a fellow had to do, to go in and serve in the military for a year or two.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, today, the pay's a whole lot better than it was when I went in.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. How much did you make when you were in? Do you remember? Monthly? Or?
Well, it seems like that very shortly after I went in, that it went from $28 a month to $50 a month for a private.
Wow.
Now, a married man, he got an allotment for his wife, and if he had children, I was, of course, was single, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember, I don't know what it was. But when I got married in 1947, as a master's sergeant at the University of California, my base pay was $128 a month as a master sergeant. Now I got separate rations and separate quarters, and I don't remember what that was. And the university gave us $30 a month and gave us an apartment that we could rent. And as well as I remember, it was $19 a month, that apartment was.
Wow.
It was one bedroom, a sitting room, a kitchen, and a bath. What it had been an old Army hospital. And they made 8 or 9 apartments out of each one of those wards. And that's where I had the apartment. And I lived there till I got out of the Army, came home.
Wow.
And my wife didn't work, and we lived on what I had. I wasn't in debt, and I made it on that. And I guess when I went back to Clemson, I was in the reserve, and Bob, I believe was his first name, Bob Lynch, was a football coach, was a regimental commander. He was a full colonel
At Clemson?
at Clemson, and I was his regimental sergeant major. And he and I became quite friends during that period of time. And of course I stayed in the reserve for another 7 years. And it got to be inconvenient when I was finished and was working. I was managing a turkey farm in Sumter. And I either had to go to Columbia, which was 40 miles away, or to Florence, which was 40 miles away, for the reserve meetings. And so I got out after 7 years.
Wow.
Which, if I'd have stayed in another 7, I could have probably retired. Because I had 7 years military service, and then I'd have had 14 years reserve.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, the base pay at that time didn't amount to anything. If you retired, you figured it wasn't that much.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't any big problem getting out.
Well, I thank you so much for your service,
Well,
Mr. Mathis.
I thank
Thank
you
you.
for coming by.
Well, thank you for letting me interview you. This was
Well,
great.
I hope it wasn't too much